Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Straight Outta BS podcast. I'm your host, Jordan. We just broke 4K in views, so let's work on 5K. Thank you guys for all the support. We also just broke 700 hours of view time, which is crazy to me. I never thought that I was like 700 hours of view time to me. I know it's not a lot, for most people that have like millions of subscribers or whatnot, but to me, 700 hours of view time is that's literally 700 hours of fucking people watching my podcast, and I'm just doing it by myself. So I'm just a little guy over here, and I have over 700 hours of view time, and so I just want to thank you guys a lot. Let's keep up the good work. One thing I've noticed though is tap that like button. For real, when you watch the video, tap the like button, because I've seen I'll get 9 likes. I think the most likes I've gotten on a video is 12 likes, but if it's 100 people viewing the video, then we should have at least 50 likes. So please, please, please hit that like button. Right now, if you're watching this video, hit that like button. Make sure you do it. Make sure you comment. Make sure you're sharing the videos so we can continue to get this out in the algorithm. I really appreciate it. I'm not trying to sound naggy or anything, but I'm just trying to get the word out there as much as possible, and I need you guys for that support. So let's just continue this support. You guys are doing really good. Let's keep up the good work. Also, I just dropped a new design in my merchandise store. It literally says, ask me about the troubled teen industry, and then below that, it has a picture of my kitten, and then it says, ask me about W.W.A.S.P, and then it says breaking code silence, and a few of the other hashtags on the bottom. Because I'm trying to get the conversation out there, so when I wear that in public, I want people to be like, yeah, it says to ask you about it, so I'll just start talking to random people about it. So hopefully that'll help get the word out there more. And so that's pretty much it for announcements. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce my guest for the day. I don't know what you go by, so I'll let you introduce yourself, because I know that you have a different name on Facebook. And, at least, because right here it says Morgan. So I'll just go ahead and introduce yourself, where you went, what school, and what year.
Yeah, I go by Bink, like most people know me as Bink, or I have a nickname of Bobo, and I'm basically changed my name. I have a dead name that I don't go by anymore, and so I changed my name to Morgan.
Okay, what name do you want me to put in the title?
Just go ahead and go with Bink, because a lot of the other T.T.I people know me as that.
Okay. Okay. So what school did you go to and what year?
Well, I went to a couple places. I was in Cascade and Heritage, but I was also in a mental health ward for a couple of months prior.
Okay, so you said, I'm just trying to take notes, Cascade?
Yeah, that's a Synanon based place.
Okay. And then from there, where did you go?
Heritage. That's in Provo, Utah.
Okay. And then from there, where did you go?
Before that, I was just in a mental, when I was really, in 8th grade still, I was put in a mental ward, but I was in there to finish out 8th grade for 2 months. And it was just an adolescent ward.
Was it a 72-hour hold place, or was it long term?
I was in there for 2 months. I don't know what they were designed to really do, but I know I was in there longer than most of the other kids. And it was in the Bay Area.
Okay. And that was a little earlier on, right? That was one of your first experiences, right? Because you said 8th grade, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And for that, I kind of had a semi-transport type situation.
Did you know you were going there, or did they just come and get you?
No, that's why I want to talk about that place, because that was my first experience, and I wasn't told what was happening until it was happening.
Okay. Well, you want to start off with that?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go in a normal timeline so people can, follow. So even a little bit more background, I was raised in a new age cult kind of situation, which was a little more common in the 70s and 80s because people just normalized that stuff. So a lot of people that had been hippies, got burned out and like joined a bunch of these cults that were, Middle Eastern influenced. And
The
it's
love and light,
totally,
love and
totally like cultural appropriation based and
yeah.
stuff.
Was it like the whole love and light thing?
It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's totally like the person they follow, his name translates to mean compassionate father, and they had this whole east meets west kind of thing, and they believe in reincarnation, and they believe
Yeah.
that 3/4 of the world's population is going to die, and then there'll be this really idealized time in humanity after that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm very familiar with the New Age, and its effects on people long term. It drives
Yeah,
people crazy.
still around, still getting really popular, and it's actually becoming more of a social problem.
Yeah, it's getting people think that it's a substitute for mental health, for actually getting like actual counseling. Instead of that, they're just like, oh no, just love and light and just love everybody. But people don't
Yeah,
understand, people don't realize, and they get caught in this loop, is that not everybody deserves your love. Like there's some people that are horrible people that treat you like shit, right? They don't deserve my love. Okay, I'm just saying.
yeah.
There's
Respect
certain
is
people.
respect, and appreciation, and all those things are should be earned, not just automatically given.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to authoritarianism and things like that, hi dude, it can be a problem. Like adults can be really authoritarian with you when you're a child and expect automatic fealty and respect for them, and they haven't done anything to earn that child's respect. And that a lot of people don't even, that's like a novel idea to a lot of people, that children should respect you when you're an adult in their life.
Well, yeah, and it's it's kind of structured in that way as the mother and father, right? They're viewed as authority figures. That's what they are. They're giant authority figures when we're children.
Yeah,
And so we look to them for what's right to do, what's wrong to do, and not all the time that's accurate. That's not accurate all the time.
right, they're not always right.
Yeah,
So yeah,
sure.
so I was in there, and it's funny is I even remember that in the same way people talk about the troubled teen industry, where most of the kids that were in there were some kids that had mental health problems in there, but a majority of them were happy kids who just got caught smoking weed. you know they were just getting in some trouble in school or something, or talking back to their parents, and so they ended up in this mental ward. And that's basically what I was doing. I had bad grades. I was in like what was the equivalent to special ed, because I have some learning disabilities, and I might be some kind of neurodivergent. I'm not sure. um I haven't been tested again in a really long time. So
And for
uh,
people that don't know, what is neurodivergent?
well, it usually means on the autistic spectrum, but it's also been uh, lately included for ADHD.
Okay.
But I think it's also a generalized term, because I think it can mean that you know your brain is just not wired to be typical. you know and I really don't feel like mine is. I don't feel like I uh, my whole life thought fully typically, and I got in trouble a lot at school when I was really little, and the school that I went to was run by the cult that I mentioned. So, and they don't think they're a cult, but they are.
And this cult that you mentioned, was that the was that the mental health place, or was that your what
No,
you were referring
no,
to?
that place was just run by the city that I lived in. But when I was transported, the two men that came to my house to take me there in the car, that didn't speak a word to me and everything, they I wasn't grabbed or anything like that, so I wasn't gooned, and it wasn't a hired transport company, but they were the parents of other children that I knew, and so I knew of them as authority figures, and I was really frightened. My mom didn't tell me what was going on, and while it was very quiet and non dramatic or intense, shh, be quiet. I was really scared, you know what I mean? Because these were people that I, you know, knew were important members of that community, you know, who like one of a couple, well, both of them actually were sort of in charge of a lot of areas of it. And I kind of knew that, you know, I don't think that the adults thought us kids were paying that much attention to everything that was going on, but I knew that they were really important people in that community. So, you know, being in the back of the seat of the car and them in the front seat of the car and not knowing really where I was going. My mom just said she was putting me someplace to get help, and I hadn't committed any crimes. I had not threatened to commit suicide. I had not done anything really that warranted this, except for that she used something that I wrote in a letter to her where I said that I wish I could talk to God, which is so ironic, right? And they used that to manufacture a crisis and say that I was suicidal when I wasn't.
Yeah.
And, you know, the social worker thought that was a great idea to have me put in this place because school didn't want me to be there longer than like 12 o'clock in the morning or in the afternoon and just take morning classes. And my mom didn't want me around all day during the day. You know, my parents had just gotten divorced. I don't think that she was engaged to really wanting to raise me the rest of the way. You know, my whole family had broken up and, you know, my grandmother had died, her mom, and I was, you know, having, you know, behaviors and everything. And she was on her own with me and she just didn't want to do the work. And by then I was already really angry. I'd been abused, you know, in different ways. I won't go into that in too much detail, but I'd been physically, emotionally, mentally, psychologically, developmentally abused. And so I was showing signs of that trauma, and nobody knew what that was back then, but I don't care. When people say, well, it was different back then, so we didn't know, I don't think that that matters. I think that anybody at any time that's looking at another human being should know what compassion is. So even if we didn't have the language to describe these things, that adults and people in children's lives should know better than to treat them that way or to put their hands on them like that, you know,
For sure.
and to scapegoat children like that.
I agree. So when you're talking about cults, you're talking more in the sense of like sharing the same kind of mind state, the same kind of mind frame, the same kind of beliefs type thing, instead of like actual organization cult. You're talking about like them having the same kind of beliefs, so it was scary because you didn't know what they might believe, and everybody believes the same thing. So you were like, what's going to happen to me when you're in the back of that car, right? Type thing.
Yeah, you know, and I didn't really, I mean, like I'd been in public school and everything, but everything in my life revolved around this cult. So I didn't live on a compound or something, but everybody was, you know, in the same neighborhood, and the location of the, I've got to feed the dogs while I talk to you. The location of their, you know, their temple and everything like that was like in this neighborhood. And, you know, so when I would walk down the street in the neighborhood, I was in like, you know what I mean? I'd be walking by all these houses and it would be the people that live there, you know?
Yeah. So you don't
Yeah.
know if you're gonna do some weird shit or like, you know, did you know what all their beliefs
Yeah,
were?
like you feel like you're growing up under a microscope.
Yeah. I completely get that. I
Yeah.
completely get that. So once you got to the hospital, what was that like? Did
Well, I gotta admit that it was kind of fun because kids were listening to metal and other kinds of music, and my mom didn't like me to listen to that kind of stuff. So, and I was around other kids, so I was kind of having a good time, you know? I mean, I didn't have to deal with the authority of my mom, and, you know, things were kind of regimented. And I know that that can sometimes be a comfort to people, sort of like prison, when everything's scheduled for you. You can kind of find comfort in those things, especially if you're neurodivergent. You need some structure, you know.
consistency?
Yeah.
Consistency, I think
And
is
my home life hadn't been very safe, or, you know, my parents weren't like scuzzy or anything like that. They were really clean and like trying to be very responsible, healthy people in society. But, you know, I don't think that everybody that was involved in the situations that I was in was realizing the kind of suffering that I was going through. Because of the the way that the community, dealt with children that have learning disabilities or problems isn't to, I mean, it was just really easy to like single that child out rather than really give them the help that they needed.
Or
Because when people are putting things in a
ship them off.
spiritual paradigm, so-called spiritual paradigm, you're not really looking at the whole person,
Yeah, and it's so much easier for people to just ship them off. For a lot of parents, they'd rather just ship them off and just do the, oh, everybody says this will work, so I need the instant cure for, or not instant, but I need the fastest cure for my child. So they just would rather ship them off. And I noticed a similarity between what's going on with the troubled teen industry. I just thought of this the other day, and what they used to do to people with disabilities back in the day in the mental institutions, where they would fucking do the lobotomies and all that shit. They just ship them off and say, we don't know how to deal with this, so we'll just, and the doctors that were doing the lobotomies, oh, this seems to work, even though there's no scientific data to prove that it works. Okay, you're just harming the individual more. But to a lot of parents that I've heard from, it was just, we would rather have done that than watch them, fall apart in life and go down a horrible path when you don't even know they would have done that. You don't have gotten help. They could have found somebody that, cared about them enough, took care of them. Maybe they just needed counseling. They obviously probably just needed somebody to listen to them and understand their condition, or research their condition enough to be able to understand their condition. But I noticed a huge similarity between those mental institutions back in the day, which is complete torture, and what they're doing nowadays. I feel like it might have even evolved from that into the troubled teen industry in a way.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of places that were really horrible, like Willowbrook and state-run institutions that were not feeding people or taking care of them properly. The facilities were dirty, and there were people that were in there as mentally retarded, which is a phrase that they used at the time, and they had like cerebral palsy, and this is in the 70s, even as recent as the 70s, and they just didn't know that that person was neurotypical and had a perfectly functioning brain. One of the guys that was in Willowbrook he had cerebral palsy, ended up becoming a doctor, and I think that he had something to do with developing the ADA, and things like that. And the ward that I was in, sure, it was pretty good for the 80s because it was just like an adolescent ward. Like I said, there was kids in there that were just like caught using pot and stuff. So I wasn't, the place across the hall was for people who were more mentally ill. And I had a short visit over there for a little while, and it was a little weird, but and I don't think that people were being mistreated there, but you definitely got the sense that people were in there, and that they didn't necessarily need to be in there, and that if they had had a better loving family scenario, they wouldn't be institutionalized like that. People cart off their family members when they're mentally ill, but a lot of people who are mentally ill can have dual diagnosis and have an intellectual disability, but they're not harmful to themselves or others, but they end up institutionalized. And while not all institutions abuse the people that are in these places, they certainly can get neglected. You know what I mean?
And I also
people can get emotionally and physically neglected even.
Yeah, and I also feel like in these places, just the fact that they're so isolated, okay, from the outside world, that in itself to me breeds contempt and people wanting to push the umbrella and try and see how far can I push things, because we're not in the public eye, really. We don't have people coming up here to check on the students, right? So what the fuck can I get away with? How much stuff can I actually get away with here? And then once people start getting away with shit, they're like, oh, I can get away with it now, so I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to make a habit out of doing this, about torturing the kids or whatever. And maybe some people get off on it, but I feel like that environment in itself breeds that kind of shit.
Oh, well, that's a different topic, but I follow you. I mean, in the troubled teen industry, it was like expected that the kids abuse one another in order to keep the narrative going, to keep things running in the school, and to like like save money. I mean, they made a profit off of us doing the labor to run that school. So they had a really low staff to student ratio, right? And so while we were chopping all the wood and stuff like that, and they were saying these were good life lessons for us to do this labor, they're saving a lot of money off of that. And our parents look at that like it's teaching us learn how to do different kinds of tasks and things like that. But I can tell looking back that while they were paying a lot of money, and I'm not saying cutting wood hurts my feelings or that it was too hard on my body, although some of it, what it can be like that in these places. Like some of these places have kids labor all day long. So they are literal labor camps, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm not here just to talk about just my experience, by the way.
Yeah.
You know, I'm still working on my trauma, but I've been in long enough now that I can like look at the bigger, you know, schema of like what the T.T.I is and have talked to enough survivors now that like it's real clear that they have some kids like, you know, rail off numbers and they're not allowed to make eye contact with each other or look, they don't even have clocks in the room.
Yeah.
You know, kids have had to hold their bowels and urine at these crazy times. And it's just like, you know, I mean, food was used to abuse kids, and then they were forced to eat their vomit if they couldn't keep down food that they were forced to eat that was bad. There's been so many things that have happened to people who are adults now that were in there, and it's still happening. For anyone who may be new here that's listening, it is still happening. There's no timeline that makes a difference, you know. I mean, it's good to see me here as an older person talking to show you how long it's been going on. And there's people that are even older than me who were in there, same kinds of models, and it's still going on. And it's gotten worse, I think, in some ways, because I think that what I mean by worse, because I'm not comparing trauma here, what I'm talking about is the way that they fund themselves. They are going for people with less money now. So that doesn't mean that people who have a lot of money aren't still sending their kids in. But I want to dispel the myth that it's only rich people that send their kids to these places. But I think that the numbers have gone up in the kids that are in foster and growing up in poverty and have faced a lot of abuse and you know, or adopted, and then when their parents don't like the way their kids turn out, they send them in there, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Even though when you adopt somebody, in my opinion, you're adopting them and you're adopting everything that could, would, or should go happen to them, right? So
Yeah.
you should be there for them regardless. And as being somebody that was adopted at birth, like, you signed up for it. Yeah, I know I was difficult, and I know I was a fucking like really hard to handle and whatnot, but you signed up for that. You may not have correctly signed up for everything because you didn't know that I had ADHD and all that stuff, but you still signed up for it. I feel like that should be like that should automatically be known and understood by people that want to adopt people, in my opinion.
Yeah, because that's another thing that's sold out there is that parents say that they tried everything before they sent their kids. That is not true. You know, a lot of times they didn't try everything before they had their child incarcerated and or sent, you know, to be placed in the troubled teen industries.
And how can you try everything if nobody knows everything to try? Nobody knows everything to try.
No, right.
It's not resources to like, there was, especially back then, there wasn't really resources to, unless you really did research, yeah, or now even, to do research, because these places are so tightly locked down that the amount of information that comes out is very limited, and then the amount of, any information that does come out is sometimes filtered by that program or whatever it is. Like they only say what they want you to see. Like they only, you know, they make sure that nothing tarnishes their name if people are going to talk about it. There's a lot of places that do that.
Yeah, sure. There's been a lot of like, you know, like people who are like for the TTI have gotten really upset because on like the Google rating system, survivors have gone in there and given them bad reviews because it's one of the only ways that we can push back and expose them for what they are. And people are like, oh, these are just bratty adults that still have attitude problems, that are mad at what happened to them. Don't listen to those people. You know, they're just angry because they were the people that had a hard time in our program. And it's like, no, they're exposing you for the truth of what you did to them while they were inside of that place, you know? So I think it's Trinity that just got announced to finally have been shut down. I know that like Solstice East or Solstice hasn't been shut down yet. Agape hasn't been shut down yet. They're still trying. Provo Canyon hasn't been shut down yet. I'm guessing, since you're really young, that W.W.A.S.P still exists.
Oh yeah. I mean, they've converted onto another umbrella. I don't believe it's no longer W.W.A.S.P, but they've rebranded, and it's the same thing with a different name. They're just gaslighting the name. That's gaslighting people by the name.
And W.W.A.S.P comes from Synanon. So Synanon is known as like, you know, one of the country's most dangerous cults, and that's not a joke. And the guy, you know, Charles E. Dietrich, like, he developed his style of therapy off of him doing LSD, but then he wanted to experiment basically on people. He didn't call it that, but he gave people a, you know, reinvented LSD trip by keeping them up all night and stripping them of their identity and then putting back in new identity, like kind of look at it like a bullet point list of things for them to, you know, reconfigure how they looked at their life. But it was all formulaic, you know, formulated shit to follow and like give you a new lease on life and how you look and how you know, how you look at your life and how you identify as a human being and how you see yourself. And that's brainwashing. I mean, if you look at Stephen Hassan's bite model, it ticks off a lot of boxes. It goes down the list. And, you know, that stuff was invented for adults to go through in Synanon. And then they brought that to the W.W.A.S.P schools like Straight Inc. and CEDU, Cascade, Rocky Mountain Academy, and, you know, these early places, you know, early on were, and this isn't the religiously exempt schools, but that's all a whole other can of worms of horrible mistreatment of children due to religious exemption. But, you know, these things where they kept us up all night and tortured us to make us look at ourselves as a whole entire different human being is really sick. And it's not only bad for adults, bad therapy, it's misapplied therapy. It's not real therapy, didn't come from real people with real educations and licensure. And even that's tricky. They were hurting children with this for decades, and they still are.
Yep.
You know?
And I wanted to, for people that are new, if you want to learn more about the bite model and what it is, the episode, I forget which episode number it is, but it's Mila part 2. She actually breaks down the entire bite model and goes over a lot of other stuff. So if you're interested, if you're a newer viewer, or if you just want to revisit and see what the bite model is, look at part 2 Mila on my channel.
Thank you. I'm glad that you have had somebody that's a guest that's talked about the bite model, because anybody who reads that will know whether they're in trouble. I mean, you even have to be careful about what kinds of nonprofit jobs that you hold. You know, people can get, you know, into some dangerous territory in workplaces, and, you know, some of these MLMs and stuff are really dangerous. You know, I don't want to go too far and stretch that, because I'm not trying to say that Google's a cult. I'm not saying that, because I don't want to take away from the trauma and what's important about identifying that for other people. But there have been some instances where job places have gotten really weird. You know, like there's people who have joined political cults, for example, and that's volunteering your time, but it's absolutely dangerous for your psyche to be in a cult, you know?
Yeah. Especially when everybody thinks the same way and they're not open to free thinking for yourself, independent thinking, coming to your own conclusions. When they start trying, a huge red flag for me at least is when they start trying to fill in the blanks instead of letting you think for yourself. Just be like, oh, no, it has to be this because, you know, remember, this is the way we think. And it's like, no, I'm going to think for myself and come to my own conclusions, do my own research and come to my own conclusions after that. But instead of that, they want to fill in the blanks for you. And I see that as a huge red flag because they're not allowing free speech, not allowing free thinking, none of that.
Yeah. And like, you know, that's how white supremacy works too. I mean, it's interwoven. I'm not trying to make this political. I'm just talking about social problems here. When you look at the way that hierarchy is woven into everyday life, you know, you could another word for it, another name for it is white supremacy. You know, but for lack of like, you know, veering over into like complicated territory, if you look at the Standing Up for Racial Justice website, there is a document in there that's talking about divorcing yourself from white supremacist thinking. It's very similar to like the kind of research that you would get off of reading the lists of the BITE model. And like one of the things on that is about like subjective skill sets and thinking for oneself. The difference between rugged individualism, which is alienating, right? But working in collectivism, yet also letting people have that subjectivity as a person when they're coming into a group situation and what they have to offer, you know, versus like groupthink and forcing people to follow, you know, thought processes that become really dangerous. Because, I mean, it's one thing for us to like think of it as archaic and say that it's old fashioned and wrong, but it's another thing to try to like change the societal normative stuff that we're living in and try to disengage from that. You know what I mean? Because if it weren't for things like patriarchy, the Rebecca School wouldn't exist, or Trinity wouldn't have just been shut down, or Agape wouldn't still be open if we were able to look at, you know, evangelical, patriarchal, white supremacists like cults. You know, evangelical stuff is super dangerous for children and for people in these organizations. You know, a lot of these kids that go to these places were already Christian to begin with, and then they get sent to a Christian school, so their parents think they're safe, but they're not, you know?
Yeah.
Like some survivors that have gotten out have stayed Christian, and I'm surprised they've been able to keep that relationship with spirituality for themselves. Congrats to them for being able to do that. But you have to be really careful and probably, you know, rearrange a lot of your thought process to still have that spiritual relationship after you've been in Agape, you know, or someplace like it, you know.
Sure, for sure. Definitely. All right, so getting just so we don't swing off too off topic. So you went to that mental health place. How long were you there, and how old were you there? When you went there?
So I was 13 when I was in there, and then I graduated 8th grade while I was in there, and then I got out for the summer, and I went to camp, and I got back, and I was still like so angry at my mom. We weren't having a very good relationship, and I toured Cascade, and I wanted to get away from my family, so I agreed to go. But you got to understand that, you know, under the pretenses of some of the things I've already described to you here, I was already really in a fragile state. So, you know, I didn't see the red flags. I wasn't self-protective enough to see, you know, some of the potential dangers of what Cascade was like. And the kids kind of made it look really cool and like not hard to be there, and like that they loved it there, you know, and they kind of did. So, because they were either brainwashed or they were playing along with the situation. So I couldn't tell if there was anything wrong. I thought, oh, I can't, you know, dress how I want, or I can't listen to the music I like. Oh, I bet there's some way I'll be able to get away with that here. You know what I mean? Like, they're
Yeah.
just saying that it'll be fine. You know, it's not going to feel like every moment of my life is about what the program wants from me. But that was wrong.
So, for sure, for sure. So when you went there, so you were 13 when you got out of the mental health place, and then what were you, like 14 or 15 when you went to Cascade finally?
I might have still been 13 when I started, because I was finishing 8th grade, so that was the summer, and I went in fall, like when school would normally start, you know. So, and then I turned 14, and then had a 15th birthday there, and then sometime after I turned 15, I got myself kicked out of Cascade on
Okay.
purpose.
Okay,
Yeah,
walk us
I
through that.
intentionally did a lot of stuff to get kicked out.
Okay. Did you? Let's go back to your first day there. What do you remember about your first day there? And were you weren't transported, were you?
No.
You were. Okay. Okay.
So I
Well,
said yes to going, and I get there, and I don't remember my first day.
okay.
You know, this was so long ago. I'm 50 now.
Yeah.
So I just remember that it was really weird, you know, like just everything was so like locked down tight in the emotional sense. Like everyone was really polite, but there was something in the air that just didn't feel right. And it was just all really regimented. Everything was hyper scheduled, and everything was very, you know, systematic. And I would say the schooling was good there. Some people don't even get to go to school while they're in there. That's
Yeah.
just awful. You know, some people don't even get school. A lot of people are in the T.T.I. and they don't even get a high school diploma. So they
Yeah.
get out of T.T.I. when they're 18, and they have to go get a GED, and they have a hard time probably getting that GED.
For sure. Yeah. A lot of people don't even get their credits or anything.
Yeah.
So what
So
what
I
led
go to
up
good school.
what led up to you getting kicked out? Like what kind of
I
things were you doing to get kicked out?
I was like in those overnight things, and I started to notice just how bad it was there. I was getting in trouble for such dumb reasons, and I was, you know, I was scapegoated there. But sometimes when people talk about that, they're like, well, you were scapegoated, so of course you hated it there, you know? Like, that's why you're talking about how bad it was. You were having a hard time, and it's like, you know, it doesn't matter. You know, like why did you get out and start using drugs and end up in prison? Like that should tell you something about your experiences there.
Yeah, for sure.
So
So
I just started like, you know, refusing to do anything. I wouldn't, you know, they put me on bands with everyone. It's called bands. You can't talk to anybody. With everyone in the school. And I sat in the kitchen for 2 weeks, and they were like, we're going to tell your parents, you know, they would threaten that they would say that the next place you're getting sent is going to be like juvie. It's going to be like prison. You're going to be locked up in a room all day. You know what I mean? Like they would tell you that it was going to be really awful and that it was going to ruin your life. And so I didn't know what it was going to be like, where I was going to end up. I took that risk
yeah,
because I wanted out of there so bad.
yeah. Okay, so you finally get kicked out of there. Where do you go after that?
So they sent me to Heritage after that. And that was, again, kind of like the hospital, where it felt like kind of easy going because, you know, all of a sudden I could, you know, wear what I wanted again and listen to the music that I liked and talk about the things that I wanted. But like, the thing is there was like isolation rooms in the basements. There was girls getting raped in that place. Those girls would get put in isolation when they shouldn't have been. You know, they were getting medically, like, you know, when they were given medications, they were over medicating them. Um,
And
like
when you talk
the
about
girls
rape,
that were like wards of the state were treated really badly compared to those of us that were being paid for to be sent there. So I look back at Heritage and I realize that while they let us ride horses, because for some places that's like a myth, you know, you get there and it's not real. The horses are being boarded on the campus and you don't even get to ride the horse. You know, it was like a big lie and everything. Yeah, we could ride horses there if we earned enough privileges. But like, I see what happened to my friends there, you know, and I see how they were abused in there at Heritage, and it was bad.
so when you talk about rape, are you talking about by staff or by other students or what?
By staff. Yeah, by staff.
Okay. And when you
Yeah,
talk,
and there, you know, and at Heritage and Cascade both, there were child molesters that were staff at these
yeah,
places. I mean, you know, like we're talking like full-blown pedophiles who got away with it for years before they were there, years while they were in there, and didn't get put in prison. This is happening right now in all these places, and they never did go to prison.
it almost feels to me like they do in the Catholic Church, where I don't know if you're aware or not, but if somebody gets in trouble that's involved in the Catholic Church, they just bring him to not the temple, but the fucking what's it called? The city, like you know what I'm talking about, right? The fucking
Yeah,
yeah, they
the
bring them there,
Vatican.
then they can't
The
be
Vatican.
they can't be taken out of there, like they're protected. And like I feel like in the troubled teen industry, it's like pedophiles probably know that they can go and work in this industry, right? And be sort of somewhat protected, right? Because nobody ever comes up there, da 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 da. So I can do my thing or whatever and be protected. So now I'm starting to make a connection. Maybe it's like the Catholic Church where that's what I see. You know what I mean? People go there and they work there and.
You know, like the thing is that like people don't want to believe that um this stuff is systemically like, you know, like what it is that when we're looking back on this, like at schools where there was like 5 rapists, you know, over the course of like 10 years or 15 years, right? And they're child rapists or they're pedophiles. Um, but they're rapists because it's a crime. Um, horrible crime that should be equated with murder, but it's not. You know, people have a hard time believing that that is systemically happening, you know, so like, but we don't know. So those of us that are survivors are saying, we're not saying like, it's in some cases, right? Like, we're not saying like, oh, I mean, some places this is true, but when it's looked the other way and people walk that staff person off campus and they're let go and everything, but they're not charged.
Yeah.
But it happens more than once, or like some other situations were like looked the other way upon. We're not sure if other staff that were in charge did run it like a pedophile ring or that they just looked the other way that many times. But does it matter? Like, should it matter that they're letting this happen to these kids, you know? Because I know that people from Cascade and Heritage, they're adults now that are absolutely traumatized from their experiences in these places. If they start talking about what happened to them in there, they start to cry and they sob and they're really hurt. They'll be shaking all over and sobbing, and they're like, you know, 50 something years old like me.
Yeah.
You know, so you know, you hurt these people, you hurt them for life.
Exactly. Yeah, I was raped at 7, so I completely understand.
I'm sorry.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, though. What was the craziest thing you saw in any of these places? And what was the best thing? If there was a best thing, if there's not, that's fine. I just try to make people look at, like, try and think about it. You know what I mean? If there was anything positive that you saw from it.
The craziest thing I saw
Or heard about.
Well, some of the rape situations, bar none. For myself, I can kind of only speak for myself because I was a child. So one thing that happened while I was there was I got some kind of like bacteria or something from drinking out of a stream. And I was left up in the dorms and I was vomiting for over 3 weeks. And I got so dehydrated that my mouth was like making foam and stuff and I couldn't pee anymore. And I think I might have gotten really close to death before they finally brought me to the hospital.
So refusing medical treatment when it's
Well,
obvious.
they didn't even notice that I was up there. It was other students that finally begged them to take me to the hospital. And it was like a 45-minute drive to the hospital. And they couldn't even get a urine sample out of me when they got me there. And I had been throwing up for so long and, everything was leaving my body. I couldn't hold anything down still, that I wasn't getting better.
Yeah.
I really do believe that I got close to death in the situation because I didn't even have like pigment in my skin or anything. I was pale. And so I just remember that being so freaking scary, and also just like being yelled at like that in the raps and in the group sessions, like the way we were abused was so awful and terrifying that I just remember like telling the truth and not being believed and how scary that felt, like, and then knowing that other people were going through that too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's just so terrifying, but the best things was stuff like being with my friends and not having to be, sorry, family, but not having to be with my family made me happy. Getting to be away from the cult and being with other kids and like in nature sometimes and like being able to do art and loving my friends. Sorry, now I am getting emotional.
That's fine. Nothing wrong with that.
The people that, there's some people that I loved that were in there with me. Yeah.
Have you lost a lot of people? Have you heard of a lot of people that have passed away?
No, only some.
Okay.
I've been kind of weirdly lucky that way. I've only lost some. But I've seen some people who are not there. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah.
I've lost some people who are still alive, but they're not okay.
Yeah, they're not there in their head. They're not fully there in their head. I completely understand. I have a lot of friends like that, actually. Sorry.
Yeah, a lot of us end up unhoused and homeless when we leave, when we get out, because we don't know, you know what I mean? We don't know what to do with ourselves. We can't adjust to the world outside.
For sure, for sure.
We weren't taught how to be in the world while we're in there.
Oh, no, you're not. You're taught to focus on yourself and all of that, but you don't know what's going on in the world or any of that.
You're told to focus on yourself in the weirdest ways ever. It doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
Like things you're supposed to focus on for yourself are just really sick. Like,
yeah.
They made us talk about stuff that, like sexual stuff when I was 14, like made us admit to masturbation and it'd be 4 o'clock in the morning. And like, it's just crazy.
Yeah, for sure.
I know that crazy is not a great word, but to apply it to this situation, it's appropriate.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Definitely. Okay. So how long were you at, like, when did you get out of these places, like completely?
Yeah, so when you're in the T.T.I, if you do have school, you go to school in the summer. So some kids graduate a year early, so we get out when we're 17.
Mm-hmm.
So I got out a year early. And because I got the units that I needed to graduate high school. And so I was in college when I would have been normally a senior.
Yeah, that's a good thing. If you get your credits, that's not so bad thing.
Yeah, that was a good thing too. But being in college and living with my mom again, I did not know how to be out in the world. And I was making a lot of mistakes. I made so many errors. Like, I didn't know how to deal with like human sexuality at the time. I didn't know how to, like hang out with my friends. You know, I would start to cry all of a sudden out of nowhere. And so I eventually ran away.
After you got out?
But I ended up homeless because I was just too terrified to be back out in the world, you know? So I just needed to, I was just trying to get away from everything. But then when I did that, I found myself in another predicament, you know? And lots of bad stuff happened to me.
Yeah,
but staying home didn't feel like a choice. It didn't feel like it was a choice that I could handle to stay with my family.
Yeah, that's completely understandable. When I got out, I got heavy into hard drugs, and then I ended up homeless. And I was homeless. I've been homeless several times. I just recently got into a house. I've been in a house about a year and a half now, but I have 17 months off of hard drugs. I just smoke weed. But for a long time there, it was really hard, and I understand, never really fit in, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. What was the biggest thing for you when you got out that was hardest for you reintegrating into society? Because for me, it was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I still have a hard time trusting people. I have a hard time making friends. I feel like I can't relate to people in real life. I can't start conversations, especially with women. It's hard, and I just feel awkward, and it's really hard for me to relate to people. I have like 2 friends now that I actually consider friends. One of them's in LA, so I don't really get to see her that much. I actually haven't seen her in like 2 years now, and then one of them works all the time. So it's just really hard for me, and then I don't like being alone, and then the boredom and the loneliness come together, and then that makes me want to relapse, and it's really hard. So I just want to know what you struggle with.
Well, let me tell you something. Everything that you just said is basically the same for me. And I'm 50 years old, and I'll be 51 in January. So, and I've been in therapy for 20 years. And it's not for lack of trying. Although the last time I went and got therapy, I got some EMDR with the therapist that I really trusted. So she helped me stop having as many nightmares. I still have them, and they're still bad, but they're not as bad as they were, and they're not as frequent. So, and as far as like, you know, I can hardly be out in public. I isolate a lot. But when I am out in the world, I do my best to stay calm and not have triggering, like if it gets too noisy, I try to, you know, remove myself from the situation. I stay away from substances now. I stay and keep up with my really close friends as much as I can, like you do. Same thing though, I don't get to see them sometimes because they're far away, but I still, like, I really treasure my dearest friends. You know what I mean? They're all I have, really. They're really all I have. I mean, I love my mom and we're okay, but there's just so many scars in my family that it's kind of like a thick hide where it's sort of like a wall, you know what I mean? It just keeps some distance there. I have to.
Yeah.
After everything that has happened in my family. It's not just about me either. There's other people in my family that have problems, you know?
Did you, let's go there. Have you forgiven your parents? Could you forgive your parents? Have you talked to them about this? How's your relationship with your parents now? I know you kind of just went into that a little bit, but how is that? Where are you with that?
I don't think I'll ever be able to fully forgive them.
Okay. That's
but
fine.
I don't think that I should have to.
Yep.
Do I understand why they did what they did? Yeah. Do I understand like why they made mistakes and like sort of like see them as human beings that, you know, deserve to be alive just like anybody else? Of course. Like, but there's a healthy distance there that will always be there. Is there love there too? Yes. But, you know, I got to really keep things kind of in a healthy place.
For sure. It's good that you have those boundaries, though.
Yeah.
I commend you for that, because a lot of people don't even realize that, for one, they don't even realize that they need boundaries and that boundaries are a healthy thing. Because I feel like as a society, we don't talk about boundaries. We don't talk about this stuff unless you're in a mental health field. You don't really understand and hear that boundaries are okay. They're not a bad thing. They don't make you a bitch. They don't make you an asshole. Okay, to say that you have boundaries, it's a healthy thing to have boundaries. Because if you don't have them, to me, a lot of my red flags and bad things start to happen when I don't put up boundaries with people, because I let people take advantage of me so much. And being an empath, I let people, rain down on me with their emotions and what they're feeling so much that I take too much in, and then I have a fucking breakdown. I have a panic attack or whatnot.
Right. You have to be really careful when you have CPTSD, if that's what happened, which I would say is probably the majority of us. Although mental health practitioners love to say, oh, it's a personality disorder or whatever, and they haven't really gotten into unraveling trauma very completely yet in that world, I don't think. And I think that the mental health world needs to work on that, about developmental trauma and child abuse. But I think there's some people out there that are really doing some pioneering stuff with trauma, like there's some people that I interact with on TikTok that really, really care about childhood trauma, right? And they're practitioners, and they want to do more work with that. But like what you were just saying, it's like you were talking about boundaries, but at the same time, sometimes people with CPTSD have to override our sense of self-protectiveness, because if we want to be around people because we get lonely, we have to kind of
put down some of those boundaries.
Decide to trust people again. Or and even in the last year, I've made mistakes where I trusted people when I shouldn't have, or let people in too close when I shouldn't have. Am I mad at those people for what happened between us? No. And do I have the ability to forgive people today that do impasses against me? Yes. Like I don't stay angry at people. I might not talk to them ever again. But if like things go kind of sour between me and another person who I see has too many problems for me to be close with, or maybe I have too many things that are unhealed that they're kind of making me remember, you know what I mean? And they're a little too strong flavored for me or something, I gotta like kind of like, take some steps back or whatever. And I try not to get hyper vigilant and too self-protective, but rather take some steps back and step back and out of it before someone gets hurt, emotionally. So I think I've gotten better at living life than I used to. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's good.
It's still the same problems, right, that you're talking about, but it's like, it's not as scary. You know what I mean? Like you learn how to like live with it more.
Yeah.
Yeah. And manage it. Yeah.
So how, before I ask the last few questions, how are you now in life? I know that you said last night that you have a hubby or whatever, so it sounds like you found somebody that understands you and you can vibe with. That's good. So like,
he's really patient. He's really patient with my my problems with CPTSD. He had a lot of things happen in his childhood too, though. So we were like a couple of orphans there for a while, and I kind of had to raise him, and sometimes I have to remind him to stay in touch with his feelings, because he can kind of shut down. He grew up really poor. A lot of us that love each other a lot, though, end up together because we're like lost little kids that are just hanging on to each other, just terrified of the world. And but do we love each other and help each other get better? I think so. Especially if there's a lot of real love there,
Yeah. But I also feel like with that, it's kind of a double-edged sword with meeting new people, because it can cross over into being codependent then too.
Yeah.
Because a lot of us survivors, me especially, I am codependent. And I have, for example, I have a friends with benefits relationship. That's the one that lives in LA, right? But I always have to constantly remind myself that, look, she's made it clear she doesn't want an actual relationship, and I have to distance myself sometimes because and especially when I was starting to get to know her at first, it's like I can't come on too strong because then I'm going to push her away. I don't want to come off as codependent, but I am kind of codependent on her in a way, in the sense that she's one of my only friends. So it's hard for me to delineate like how much I should invest in her and like how much I should like push, like keep my distance, because that can cross over into codependency, and that's when I start pushing people away. And codependency isn't really healthy. It can be healthy, but it's usually not. And so I have this whole balancing act that I have to.
I mean, the thing about this idea of codependency, right? Like, it's really hard to be in this country and survive. So if you're gonna get like trapped in a house with somebody somewhere, because that's kind of what life is, are you gonna be enjoying each other's company or not? So just look at it that way, and like you know, like, who would you rather be trapped on in a deserted island with sort of scenario? Because that's sort of what life really is. And living in this like this system that is so hard to survive in now because of things like, you know, managing being low income, or, you know what I mean, like trying to catch up with life because you might have a learning disability like I do, so I couldn't get very high paid wage jobs even though I worked very hard for many years of my life, and so is my spouse. Like, I don't regret that we're kind of codependent. It's some of the parts where we're really like this, that work together, that we want to spend all of our time together, that I'm like okay with it, right? Now, if we were doing things like not letting one another have any other friends and award each other, you know, the agency to do what we like and want, then that would be a problem, right? So he's, you know, like, or when you're talking about your friends with benefits situation, it's fine that she is clear with you about the distance that needs to be there between the two of you, right? But if she was doing that and hurting you, right, actively, then I wouldn't say that that's healthy for you. Like, you wanting or needing more than that isn't codependent of you. So if you're getting your needs met, that's what, you know what I mean? Like, look for that, and then that's what's going to matter, you know?
Yeah, and I think
and that's what works for me.
Yeah, I think the biggest part with her, and I don't really want to, I'm not really going to get too far into it after this because that's between me and her, but I think the biggest part with her is that when she gets depressed, she becomes super distant. And when that happens, I start to feel like it's something I did. And so I have to remind myself constantly, look, she's in LA. I can't have done anything wrong, okay? I haven't said anything wrong. It's not anything to do with me. It's most likely to do with her. But when she does that, I have to battle with that and contend with that. And then also, I just want to know that she's okay, like half the time. I just want to know she's all right and she's still, you know, because when she gets into that state, it's like, when any of us get into that state, I'm not just going to say her, when any of us that are depressed get into that state and we start isolating, I become worried because I know what can happen in that state. So,
well, like, for what's going on with you guys, and I'm not trying to like single you out. I think it's good to use our lives as an example for other people, right?
yeah.
So this is for people to take as like leading into like ways to live life kind of thing. Like, if you and her devise a plan that when she's like depressed and she needs to like be alone, that she says to you like something that helps you feel better, that's like a ongoing phrase, like, this is one of those times where I'm getting depressed and I need to be alone, but before I sign off and don't talk to you for a little while, I want you to know I care for you, or something like that, where you make a plan for that when that's happening. It'll help you feel safer, right? And so like we all can do things like that to navigate post-trauma scenarios and what our relationships are and how they work.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. If you could go back in a time machine and not go through this experience, like with boarding schools and all of that, would you do it, and why?
Yes, but only if there was different life scenarios going on where I was helped to feel safer and better, and like my needs were being met, and that I like was, you know what I mean? That like my the things that make me struggle in school were handled like straight on and appropriately, and that there was like love and safety around, and that I wasn't being abused. And I mean, I guess I could say it'd be neat if I could do it knowing what I know now and
Yeah.
go back to my 20s again. Then I would like not make the mistake of like drinking too much, and I would feel better about myself. And so I'd be like in my 20s, and I would like know to like nurture myself and take care of myself better and be better to my friends and not be so traumatized. And, like, it would be great. Like, wish I could be young again in the 90s and like do that over again, sure.
For
But
sure.
I would want to do it knowing what I know.
For
So I
sure.
think that's what time travel's all about.
Yeah, that's the tricky part.
Yeah.
Knowing what you know now, is it your belief that these schools could or even or should or even could be regulated at this point, or is it your belief that they should all just be shut down?
No, I'm into complete abolition of the troubled teen industry. Do I think that there needs to be like a scenario where children are dealt with differently? Yes. And what I mean by dealt with differently is that we need to prevent them from getting hurt, or if they have psychological problems that can't be, you know what I mean? Like, or disabilities that can't be, you know, like
Addressed.
prevented, right? They need to be addressed differently so that we don't have to institutionalize people like we do. So the tricky part of that is the whole entire country needs to change. And I know that's a tall order, but it does. I mean, this stuff all intersects other things, other problems that we have in this country.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else you want to say about your experience, or that you would want to tell a parent that maybe is thinking about sending their kid to a place like this, or anything like that? Closing thoughts?
I mean, really just do everything you can. Look for resources, find out like what CPTSD is, and get help for your kid. Like, let's say, I know about kids that are like, they have people that have daughters that got raped and they became depressed, and then they send them to the T.T.I because they got quiet and depressed. That is the worst reason of all the reasons, because all the reasons are bad, to send them to these places. And this is not like appropriate mental health care for kids, bar none. So if your kid does show problems, stick with them, get therapy yourself, because it's probably more likely than not that their needs aren't being met because there's something missing in your life. And I'm not pointing fingers at you. I'm trying to tell you that, you matter too. So get help and help your kid, but do it like in a way that has to do with love, compassion, kindness, and the true sense of the meaning of the word wellness.
And also, I feel like it's an important distinction to make that a lot of parents have children and then end up projecting all of their insecurities or their traumas onto their child unknowingly. A lot of the time, it's unknowingly they do this. Okay, so by going to counseling yourself as a parent, you're dealing with trauma, and you're not then projecting your bullshit onto your child. Okay, and
especially parents that are angry. And I'm not crazy about dialectical behavioral therapy, because I think for T.T.I kids, like, survivors, it uses too much coded language. So it's a lot like program language. But I think for parents that are like have a short fuse and anger problems and things like that, like DBT would be really great for parents to take to reparent themselves, to become better parents for their kids, so that they have a better relationship with their kid, and then they, and their kid can get good private therapy. Do not mess with your kids' like privacy, as long as they're not completely unsafe, but strategize, figure out a different way of looking at life, think outside the box, and get care for yourself and your kid.
For sure. I completely agree. Well, would you be open to a part 2 if I take some notes and remember some stuff, or if it's just in the future, if for nothing else, just to check up on you in a part 2 and to see how you're doing?
Sure, if you'd like to. I know I talk a lot, but it seems like you had a good time. I did too. Yeah, I especially like to talk about stuff that's not about my own story more. You know what I mean? Like stuff that's going on in the T.T.I, and maybe think of ways to like, you know, like what's like better out there. Like what kind of resources could we put together, you know, for like actually something that really comes to mind. Sorry, because the T.T.I still exists, I think it'd be really nice to come up with other people too, strategizing ways for what we can do for new survivors that are getting out.
Yeah, and
That's,
I think
that's something I think about a lot.
I just did my second 3-way combo the other day. It's really good if you haven't watched it yet. But I'm thinking about doing more of those 3-way or 4-way conversations and just picking maybe like some random people, being like, cool, you guys want to come on a call, and we'll just like brainstorm and just, you know, interact with different people, have different people from different places, just come on an episode and just start talking and brainstorming, coming up with new ideas, because that's the only way we're going to come up. We need all the brain power we can get, so maybe even do a random 3-way or something with another
I would
survivor.
love to do that. I also am working with a team of people right now, so maybe we could come on your spot and we could all kind of work together. We also have been doing lives on TikTok at 6 o'clock Pacific time. I think it's 9 o'clock Eastern, where we just do a live on my TikTok, which I think it's like at Bobo Crusher. And but I'm just the host or whatever, but we talk about T.T.I stuff on there on my TikTok.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not trying to just like, you know, because there's other people on there that I think are way more interesting than me that are on there.
For sure. Yeah. I'd be down to come on the show, or like, you know, do a collaboration. Sure. So yeah,
I'd
let
love
him
to have
know.
you on there. Yeah.
Yeah, let him know, and if anybody's interested. And then I'll send you a friend request on TikTok, and we'll connect and whatnot. We'll figure it out.
I love that.
And we'll just stay in touch too. And just if you ever need to talk to anybody, I'm here. Just reach out. Let me know.
Yeah, I was really glad to meet you.
For sure. I'm really glad that we finally got this done. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, and you have a wonderful day.
You too. Take care.
All
Have a
right.
good time.
All right, bye. And make sure you guys hit the like button. If you haven't done it already and you've watched till the end, make sure you hit the like button, share it, comment, do all that stuff. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Bye.
Bye.